Organizations differ in terms of the stage of their development. Let's take a look at the organizational life cycle. The organizational life cycle is the life cycle of an organization from its creation to its termination. It reflects the expected sequence of advancements experienced by an organization as opposed to a randomized occurrence of events. As you might imagine, the pressures of managing employees in a young, startup company are different from those in a mature organization striving to protect its established market share and competitive position. As companies mature, the pressures regarding the management of employees evolve as well. If you've worked for several different companies, you've probably noticed that each organization has its own way of doing things. Differences in how companies operate and how employees act signal what is called organizational culture. Organizational culture is the set of basic assumptions, values, and beliefs of a company's members. In some ways, it's useful to think about a culture as the informal or unwritten side of organizations. These values and beliefs are not necessarily spelled out, but are of a great deal of importance. There's no predetermined list of types of cultures that companies can choose from. Each company has its own distinct and unique culture. Some cultures may be more bureaucratic in nature than others, valuing rules, formalization, and hierarchy as the appropriate ways of doing business. Other cultures may be more entrepreneurial in nature than others, emphasizing creativity, knowledge exchange, and innovation. While employees might not be able to clearly articulate the exact culture of their company, most employees understand that within their organization there are certain ways of doing things, making decisions, and interacting with each other as well as with customers. Similarly, the actions of top managers and the HR practices used to manage employees send messages to employees that signal the values and behaviors that are most appropriate. Organizational culture influences employee management in several ways. The culture of the company affects managerial decisions about which specific practices to use with regard to work design and workforce planning, building of competencies, and management of attitudes and behaviors. The culture of a company also influences the effectiveness of different HR practices. And finally, the strength of culture further influences the effectiveness of employee management practices. It is possible, however, that a strong culture might conflict with company goals. This is most likely to happen when companies make strategic changes without considering the cultural values of the organization. In many ways, this is an exchange. Companies use pay and benefits and training as incentives for employees to perform their jobs in exchange for the employee's commitment to the organization. There are two ways employees evaluate this exchange. First, there's a relational component. Do employees perform the work they are expected to perform, and do they receive what they are promised? Second, there's a perceptual component of this exchange. The term psychological contract means the perceived obligations that employees believe they owe their company and that their company owes them. The importance of a psychological contract is that it governs how employees evaluate company decisions regarding how they are managed, and as a result, it governs how they act on the job. When we view the management of employees from the employee's perspective, two concerns emerge. First, employees expect that their company will help them balance work and life obligations. Second, employees constantly evaluate the extent to which their company holds up to its end of the bargain and fulfills what they believe the company owes them for their hard work and dedication. The challenge is that, unlike with legal issues that also govern how companies manage employees, there are no clear-cut standards regarding fairness. Fairness is in the eye of the beholder. What is fair for one person may not be perceived as fair to another. Managers and employees may disagree regarding the extent to which the company has met its obligations to the employee. Distributive justice is the fairness of what individuals receive from companies in return for their efforts. Ideally, this is a balanced exchange, with employees receiving compensation or other benefits that they would view as being equal value for the time and effort they put into their jobs. Procedural justice focuses on whether the processes that are used to make decisions, allocate rewards, or resolve disputes, or that otherwise affect employees are viewed as fair. Interactional justice represents how employees feel they are treated by their managers and supervisors in everyday interactions. Do managers treat employees politely and respectfully? The underlying principle of interactional justice is that how managers treat their employees is something that is as important to employees as the actual decisions regarding their treatment. It is important for managers to maintain open lines of communication with employees to monitor their attitudes about justice in their jobs. The labor force means the individuals who are available for work. Companies will have to consider several notable trends in the labor force in coming years. Specifically, the composition of the workforce is becoming older and more diverse. An aging workforce brings with it a number of challenges and opportunities for companies. For example, there are likely to be increased challenges with workforce planning. As the baby boomers approach retirement, companies are facing a situation in which a considerable number of their employees may leave the workforce. With the slower growth of younger workers to replace them, many companies are increasingly competing for a limited supply of workers to replace individuals who retire. In addition to the population aging, certain demographic groups are expected to grow more rapidly than others. For example, the number of women in the labor force is expected to grow by 5.4% between the years 2012 and 2022. Women are expected to make up 47% of the U.S. labor force in 2022. This stands in contrast to the 1950s, when the share of the workforce for women was less than 40%. The growing presence of a diverse workforce also requires that managers continue to pay attention to issues of discrimination and eliminate any potential biases that might harm one or several demographic groups. Ethics and social responsibility have always been important to organizations. It is useful for managers and organizations to think about ethical behavior with regard to the following stakeholder groups, including community, governance, diversity, employees, environment, human rights, and product. Ethical actions and social responsible behavior can help foster a positive reputation that spurs additional customer support. It is important that employees understand how to act ethically. There are several steps that organizations can take to encourage ethical behavior in employees. They can appoint an ethics officer. They can consistently and constantly monitor culture. They can provide sound ethics training, perform background checks, and devote time to talking about responsibilities. Companies are increasingly being expected to cope with these challenges and opportunities in an ethical way.